Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maria Georgiou. I'm a member of the board of the Cyprus CyHRMA Association, and I'm very happy to have with me Dr. Eleni Costea. And today we have a webcast to present to you the results of the survey on COVID-19, the new norm. And this is a survey that we have been, we sent to you a few weeks ago, and we're very happy to receive your responses. And this is a survey relating to how we are responding to the new normal and how this will be impacting and shaping the way that the work is organized for the future. This survey was conducted to HR professionals, but of course it relates to our own profession, but also ourselves as employees within our organizations. I would like to introduce at this point Dr. Eleni Costea. Dr. Costea is the director responsible for the MSc in Human Resource Management in the University of Cyprus, and of course a member of our association and a long-standing collaborator in many activities that we're doing. So I would like to pass on the floor to Dr. Costea to share with us the results of the survey that we conducted. This survey was done in collaboration with another associate, Dr. Halal Perzet, and we'll have the opportunity later on to get your comments and your questions and to discuss together about the survey results. I'm sure there are going to be very interesting insights and a very interesting discussion later on. So, Dr. Costea, thank you very much for your collaboration and for presenting the results today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you to Mrs. Georgiou, and thank you also for asking me to present the results of your survey for you. It's my pleasure and my honor. And we do have a great collaboration indeed between the association, me personally, and our master's program at the University of Cyprus. So I will start the presentation of the results, and then at the end, anybody who has questions and would like to write them in the chat, we will be happy to answer them in turn after the presentation. Okay, let me just share for a moment the presentation. One second. Okay, great. So, the question is, has COVID-19 brought a new era in HR? And I will leave this question until the end after I present the results of the survey. First, let's see, how did COVID-19 affect us? Well, the coronavirus disease, or COVID-19 as we call it, has created a global health crisis unlike any in the past 75 to 100 years. It has been characterized as a pandemic by the World Health Organization and has resulted in over 10 million confirmed cases and over 500,000 deaths globally. But this is much more than a health crisis. It is a human, economic, and social crisis that has attacked societies at their core. It has sparked fears of an impending economic crisis and recession. Social distancing, self-isolation, travel restrictions, the closing of schools and organizations have all led to human suffering, depression, fear, anxiety, as well as a reduced workforce across economic sectors, causing also many jobs to be lost with all the relevant repercussions. Therefore, the unquestionable impact to the way of life and work for millions around the globe has been seismic. Businesses and other organizations across the globe are now faced with tough choices on how to ensure their continuity and even survival. HRM's responses have ranged from enforcing stringent policies on employee health and safety to actively changing employee policies, such as moving towards remote working, for example, which was one of the main changes in employee policies. These steps have all required HR to generate faster, more frequent, and robust internal communications to keep everyone informed while the changes have taken place. They have also required closer collaboration between the HR function and the rest of middle and top management, as well as external stakeholders like ministries, unions, and other constituents. Overall, HR is called to find ways for organizations to become more flexible in relation to managing people and saving jobs. So in the midst of all these, the Cyprus Human Resource Management Association has tried to understand what are the challenges that HR faces due to COVID-19 here in Cyprus, and hence the survey. Let's take a quick view of the demographics. We had 77 valid responses, out of which 65% were people in HR roles and 14% were people in top executive positions. 39% had non-managerial and 61% had managerial positions. The sample consisted approximately of 30% males and 70% females. Most respondents were between the ages of 25 and 49. 72% were married or with partner. 23% were single and 4% were divorced. 47% had children under 18 years old, so these children were at home at some point. 12% had a bachelor's degree and 81% had a master's degree. Their employment tenure, practically all full-time, varied. Specifically, 35% had 1 to 3 years of tenure, 49% had at least 4 years of tenure, and 16% had less than a year of tenure. The industry in which the respondents worked also varied, from education to commerce to pharmaceutical, financial, but most of them were in the services sector. Now, we tried to see whether these demographics had any significant effect in the actual results of the study, the actual questions that we had asked, but we didn't really find any significant relationships. Only very few exceptions, which we will note later. So one of the first and more general questions was, how would you rate the COVID-19 as a challenge to your organization overall? And we see here that the majority of respondents thought it was a great challenge. 74% found it either very or extremely challenging. So the question here is, does that call for crisis management policies and training? We are in the aftermath, at least of the first hit of the pandemic. If there is a second hit sometime in the fall or the winter, or if there is another pandemic or another crisis in the future, should we consider as HR professionals and organizations crisis management policies, and what kind of policies for each of our organizations? Because each organization has their own psyche, their own culture, their own procedures, their own way of operations. And then should we train everybody in order to be able to handle crisis in the future for having a smoother transition when necessary? So this is the first question I would ask. Moving on into more specific HR challenges, the respondents noted these on the screen as the most important ones in decreasing order of significance. The first one was managing of stress and high morale among employees. And here women were slightly more stressed than men. Change management and or implementation of measures under COVID-19. Managing daily operations, recruiting, hiring decisions and job offers, onboarding of new employees, communication and cooperation among employees, learning and development of employees. And they're all very closely ranked here, as you can see from the mean. And again, the question here I would pose, how should each one of these challenges been dealt with more efficiently had there been adequate preparation? So is there something that we can do as HR professionals in order to prepare better in case there is a crisis or a pandemic in the future? The survey also touched upon the company's financial results and asked whether respondents felt that COVID-19 would affect them. The percentages are lower here, but still a substantial percentage of people, almost 60%, felt that, and they were quite concerned that the company's financial results would be affected this year from COVID-19. And then a question was posed about what are the precautionary measures taken, which were, the responses were pretty standard, but yet they were important. For example, the option of working from home, providing clear instructions on health protection, as well as distributing hygiene items, limiting live meetings and switching to online options, cancellation or changing the form of trainings and events, providing office disinfection. These were pretty standard, and I think they were done by practically all organizations. And then, because there was the issue of working from home, looking at the option of working from home, we wanted to know, okay, which employee categories had the opportunity to work from home? And it seems that the majority of employees had the opportunity, or they were asked to work from home. Now, in this question, if we had more respondents and we could break them up by industry, we might have been able to see in which industries employees had to work from home, in which industries they didn't have the option to work from home because they had to be at work, like in the supermarkets, for example, or the banks, and what other situations we had. We don't have these results, but it would be interesting to try and see that in the near future through another survey, perhaps. So in working from home, we wanted to see what was the situation before, and what was the situation during COVID, and what were the effects of working from home. Interestingly, while prior to COVID-19, about 47% of organizations offered work from home, such arrangement was infrequently picked up by employees. And specifically, 60% said they never used it, and only 1.3% used it all the time. But there was another percentage there, about 25% that used it about a month, once a month, and 14% who used it during the week. So there was some variation there, but certainly not as much. Working from home was not used as much as during COVID, and we don't know what is going to happen now after COVID. Indeed, during COVID, 56% of respondents worked from home. And I'm sure many of those had to work from home because the option to be at the office was not there. Another interesting result is that the overall experience of working from home was positive. 46% of respondents said it was a good experience, and 32% said it was a very good experience. Only 3% considered their experience poor. Furthermore, while the majority of respondents reported being neutral, about 35% reported preferring working from home versus 14% who preferred not to work from home. Here specifically, we did try to see if there were any connection with the demographics in the sample, like the family status, the gender, the children, but they were not significant. This is something that we should definitely look into greater detail to see whether any of these would increase or decrease satisfaction or productivity or experiences of employees. Working from home increased their levels of commitment, according to the respondents, while job satisfaction remained unaffected. Furthermore, during the COVID period, the daily working hours reported were high. For example, 51% of the respondents reported that they worked 9+ hours daily. And even though not statistically significant, as I mentioned earlier, it was slightly more challenging for those who had kids at home to work from home and to handle change management and the implementation of COVID-19. But at the same time, those with children also felt slightly more productive working from home. These are all very interesting results. They only scratch the surface in terms of the working from home situation. That's why I think it's very important to go back, maybe each one of us HR professionals in our own organizations, and delve deeper into these results and ask the why. Ask why people liked working from home. Even those 3% that had a bad experience, why was it a bad experience? Why they felt that their level of commitments increased, and all of those questions. Try to understand the issues behind the experiences. We also looked at productivity and performance while working from home. 50% of respondents reported that their productivity was not reduced, while 28% admitted that it was. 70% of respondents said that while working, they felt concentrated and efficient, while 10% disagreed. 62% of respondents said that they did not have difficulties to get work done from home, while 22% disagreed. 79% of respondents said that they were satisfied with their work performance, while 6% disagreed. Overall, compared to their work prior to COVID-19, 52% of respondents said that their performance was stable, and 29% said that it was even higher while working from home. Only 14% reported their performance as lower. Again, these are important and interesting results, but we need to search deeper and understand the positives and the negatives, the positive experiences and the negative experiences. Women's performance was reported to be higher than men's. And the former's productivity and satisfaction were also slightly higher than the latter's and the men. In terms of satisfaction and commitment, 77% of respondents felt satisfied with their job from home. 75% were willing to put up a great deal of effort beyond what is normally expected in order to help the organization be successful. Here we see employees stepping in to help the organization. Furthermore, 82% felt loyalty towards the organization, and 80%, which is a large percentage, would accept almost any type of job assignment in order to keep working for the organization. They really didn't want to lose their job, so they were willing to do whatever was asked in terms of job assignment. 75% of respondents agreed with their organization's policies on important employee-related matters. But despite all that, this is another interesting result that should be looked into greater detail. Only 39% of respondents stated that their organization really inspires the very best in them in a way of job performance. One of the questions on the survey was open and asked the respondents to name or propose top issues that need to be dealt with as a result of COVID-19, and we compiled the responses, and here they are presented in order of importance. The first one was ensuring employee health and safety. Now, even though we did not ask respondents to give us ideas or suggestions on how we can ensure employee health and safety, we may start wondering, again, as HR professionals, how can we increase the health and safety of our employees beyond what is required by law? For example, would the formation of committees, employee committees to give suggestions be a good idea? Would policies and practices beyond those mandated by law, such as those on employee well-being, for example, be a good idea? Would further training, specifically to employee health and safety, would help? And when we talk about employee health and safety, we're not talking about their physical health only, but also their emotional and their mental health. And this is the second top issue that was noted by the respondents: high morale, ensuring high morale and low stress levels among employees, which was also a challenge that was noted earlier. So how can we ensure high morale and low stress levels? Would it be through, for example, wellness programs, lifelong learning activities, work-life balance options? These are issues that we need to start thinking about. A third issue that they noted was ensuring employee productivity. I understand that when suddenly, while you're at the office and you can be evaluated from the work you do at the office, you work from home, and your colleagues or your supervisors cannot even know or see what you're doing, that it could be challenging. So how can we ensure that even if we do work from home, we can ensure and measure employee productivity? Would, for example, management by objectives be an option? Would surveys asking employees how they would increase their productivity help? Would any training programs on productivity be helpful as well? So these are, again, questions that we need to start asking ourselves as a result of what we have experienced the past few months. Another issue was, and again, this was a challenge earlier as well, ensuring frequent and clear communication channels among employees. How can we do that? Would feedback sessions help? Would social activities help? Maybe even social activities at work or right after work. Would frequent meetings also be more helpful? And we need to consider, again, our own organizational culture, our own procedures, our own ways of operation within the organization. Another top issue was ensuring unobstructed business operations. In my view, this goes back to the first question that I asked, that I posed in this presentation about crisis management policies and practices that are idiosyncratic to our companies, to our organizations. Another issue was maintaining employee commitment. How can we how can we find out the levels of commitment of our employees and their levels of satisfaction, and then how can we figure out how to increase them and keep them high? Yet another issue was the long-term sustainability of the organization. Here we may want to think a bit more holistically, such as, for example, integrating employee well-being into firm practices, because employees will tend to reciprocate. So if they feel good about being part of the organization, if they feel included, if they feel valued, then they will try to reciprocate, and they will try, as they mentioned earlier, to help the organization survive any kind of crisis. Another issue was maximizing employee potential. Again, how can we do that in our respective organizations? How can we raise commitment? How can we evaluate their training needs? And finally, a big issue during every crisis is layoffs. How can we minimize layoffs, and how can we not only minimize layoffs, but minimize their negative effects too when we have to engage in layoffs? In addition to top issues or top challenges that we have to deal with, the respondents also provided HR-related opportunities that they felt were resulting from their COVID experience. And they all have to do with restructuring and rethinking how we do business and how we approach employee well-being. Again, in the order of importance, I present them here. One of the most popular opportunities cited, and also quite naturally, was to offer more remote opportunities in policy. That's great, but we have to figure out what knowledge, what structures, what processes we need in order to achieve that, achieve those opportunities in an effective way. Another suggestion or opportunity that the respondents saw was becoming more flexible and less bureaucratic. Again, we need to consider how can we do that? How can we reduce bureaucracy in our respective organizations? How can we increase flexibility? Yet a third suggestion and opportunity was to have increased and better use of technology. What would that be? Would that be e-learning? Would that be e-hiring? Would that be greater automation? Would that be artificial intelligence? Another important opportunity was to change the culture. And here, in fact, they did note that they suggested greater trust between employees and management, higher collaboration and stronger bonds. The next one, which is also related to the previous slide, is measuring productivity more effectively. Here, I would challenge us to think of what is productivity. Let's rethink productivity. Usually we think of productivity in terms of inputs and outputs. What if we focus on all sources of energy, of people's energy, of employees' energy in relation to productivity, their physical, their mental, their emotional, and their spiritual? Yet another opportunity that the respondents noted was to establish ways of dealing with crisis and uncertainty. This is a recurring theme. Again, how do we establish a crisis mindset? What roles do we want? What procedures do we want? How do we establish ways to see a crisis before it happens, if possible, and then handle it in the most effective and less disruptive way? And the last one was dealing with employee mental health, which goes back to employee safety and health, but this is about not their physical, but their mental health. This is something that we really need to understand in our organizations because it can be very disruptive to both employees and the organization. So we need to understand what mental health is, create strategies to cope with it, and educate everyone on how to spot mental health issues at work and how to deal with them and where to go to get help. And as organizations and as HR professionals, we should have mechanisms in place to be able to support our employees in their mental health. Again, all these issues are issues that I think we can start thinking about and see and questioning how relevant they are for our organization and what we want to do with them. So given all these challenges, all these opportunities that came out of the survey, where should we stand now as HR professionals? In my view, and according to the literature, we should ensure that business can sustain while job losses are minimized. In doing so, we have to work with senior leadership to reconfigure workflows, redeploy talent, and or reskill staff to help them stay relevant. This may include family-friendly policies, yes, for virtual work life, for example, as well as further digitalization of HR. This will also help us become more flexible. Also, we should offer greater education and training across the board, virtually, in blended learning, face-to-face, it all depends. But employees need to understand not just current risks and new safety protocols, but also their respective roles in responding to risks at all fronts from disruptions in business continuity. And to do that, we can create an ecosystem devoted to creating an AI-empowered skills inventory, reskilling and exploring new partnerships with traditional and non-traditional institutions of learning. Also, often considered as the relationship managers of the business, as the HR professionals, we need to work closely alongside the line managers to ensure inclusivity and security are mainstreamed across all rank and file of employees. And finally, working with the legal and regulatory teams, we also need to lobby inside and outside the organization for policies and procedures that protect the jobs, incomes, and well-being of employees. And I'm sure we can think of a number of those policies and procedures. For far too long, the world of corporate sustainability has focused on functions related to its products and services, operations, and reputational influence. Is there a new era in HR? Going back to the question in the introductory slide, I think yes, I think it is time that we recognize the human element in all of this. And the question is how? And this is our job to answer that question. So how do we now, more than ever, recognize the human element in corporate sustainability? How can we use our experiences from the COVID-19 for a new era in HR? Well, COVID-19 showed that people are motivated at the highest levels when they can connect their work contributions to a greater purpose and mission. And we've seen that in the responses as well in Cyprus. During the crisis, people showed resilience and adaptability. So HR, in my opinion, should do more than treat employees fairly and respectfully. It should facilitate a more profound connection between employee contributions towards both the organization and society as a whole. In doing so, we should create clear connections across individual jobs, team objectives, and the organization's mission. And we should build a resilient workforce that can adapt in the face of constant change. During COVID-19, employee physical, financial, and psychological well-being became paramount. HR should embed well-being into every aspect of the design and delivery of work itself, and to fundamentally redesign work in doing so. COVID-19 did not only get to the elderly and the physically weak, but to whole societies, including all types of employees. So HR should use analytics to segment and better understand employees' unique attributes and needs in order to develop targeted programs and policies that bring out employees' personal best while affording them what they need in order to do their work safely and effectively. COVID-19 showed that while technology can supplement work, it cannot replace, but can only supplement humans. So HR can explore ways to integrate teams of humans and technology for greater productivity, efficiency, and a knowledge-sharing culture. COVID-19 brought ethical issues to the forefront on the impact of organizational decisions on different types of employee groups. HR should ask themselves critical questions to help us champion the perceived and actual ethical impacts of people decisions. Overall, HR needs to assess if it is positioned to make the impact it can and should be making across organizations. Should HR have the leadership role in social sustainability within organizations today and to the future? Personally, I think yes. The post-pandemic world order needs one familiar function to tie social sustainability together. This function should be human resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Costea. These are great insights, and there are some new themes coming up. But on the other hand, listening to you and seeing all these results, I think I could connect with the experience that I personally had over the last 3 months. So things around remote working, things around mental well-being, things around performance and how do we manage performance in a new way. And I think also we all realize that during this time, HR professionals were involved from strategy into execution in terms of what was happening in the organizations. And this is a unique opportunity. We were not always on the strategy table. I think this was a great opportunity to be there and take it from the policy making up to the policy implementation. So all this is very relevant and also gets us thinking about what the future holds for HR as a profession, but also the HR as the custodians of the way of working in our organizations. So thank you very much for both the presentation of the results, but also your own thinking and your own interpretation and insights into this survey.
Thank you, too. I think this is just the beginning of trying to understand how HR can further step up and help employees and the organizations in which they belong to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So
I don't know if we have any questions.
Okay. Let
me check. 1 second. I have to stop sharing, I think. Okay,
so we have a question around, is remote working here to stay?
That's a very good question. Interestingly, remote working has never been very popular. And many of the issues that revolve remote working have to do with career progression. People are afraid, literature shows that people are afraid that if they take up remote working, their careers will be stagnant. So if remote working is here to stay, it's up to us, organizations and HR, in my view, by ensuring that those who choose to do remote working have the same career opportunities as those who choose not to. Mm-hmm. So yeah, goes back to restructuring the whole way of thinking and working and evaluating productivity.
Well, my follow-up question to that, until we have some more questions, is we've seen it in practice and within a 3-month period. How would that look like, in your opinion, if it's now becoming a more formal way of working and an option for many people to do it either on a permanent or on a part-time basis? So spending some time at home. What's the impact to the overall culture, but also other systems relating to that?
It is a challenge because these people who will work from home will need to communicate effectively with those who are at the office. That's one thing. The second thing is research has shown that working from home works if you don't have distractions at home. So if you have dependents, whether children or elderly family who you need to take care of, and they're at home, you need to have help while you are working from home. You know, you cannot you're only human, you know, you can only do one thing at a time. So either you work or you take care of the family. So that's another thing, that you have to have the systems there to support you when you work from home. The third one is, how are you evaluated? And that's why I mentioned the issue of management by objectives, because if people do not work based on objectives and they're working based on the hours that are in the office, you know, the working hours, it's not going to work. Working from home is not going to work. And so there are challenges, and in order for it to work, we need to make some significant changes. But there are organizations that use it, and they use it substantially, especially IT companies. There's a lot of benefit to working from home for the organization too, you know, saving resources, office space, electricity, all of those things, and also the commuting from the employee's point of view.
Yeah.
But yeah, it needs redesigning.
Thank you. I think we have another question. I think we have some more questions. Will you be able to go through this?
Please, yeah, I'm trying to see where they are. Back to the chat.
Thank you. Here they are. So was COVID-19 simply a catalyst that made things occur much easier? Both changes in the work and reduction of the workforce, higher normal unemployment were perhaps coming in respective of COVID. So has COVID come in and magnified or accelerated issues that maybe were already there?
What do you think? I mean, you as an HR professional, do you think that COVID accelerated some pre-existing trends?
I think it sort of put a light bulb. So the good things were better, and the not so good things were now exposed. You know, weaknesses of organizations in terms of infrastructure, culture, communication. I think this crisis made the good things even better, because organizations that had some good digital infrastructure, had some good communication, had some communication channels they could use. They also had people engaged and committed. We can see from the survey that people continue to be committed during this time. So I'm sure it wasn't a switch from one day to the other, but it was about appreciating and understanding that their organization was and their leadership was making the most. On the other hand, I think on the weak points of each organization, like again, digital infrastructure, poor communication, very slow decision-making processes, organizations that maybe were suffering from some of these, this pandemic came to highlight and make it even more difficult to deal with. So if you had a decision-making process where you had to go through different approvals to get something very small happening, immediately they could see that this could not happen. So I think it sort of put a magnifier glass both in the good things, but also our weaknesses, our organizations.
And if I may add, I don't think that necessarily COVID expedited things per se. In fact, I think COVID may have slowed down some of those negative effects that might be negative trends that were maybe on the horizon, and maybe because also many governments stepped in and helped with situations like that, with the unemployment issue, or so, which otherwise the governments would not have helped out. There was not going to be any support from the government towards people. So maybe it's a correlation, but not necessarily a cause and effect.
Yes, it sort of it brought to the surface things that were already there. Okay, in case of a second wave, do you think that companies will be indeed ready, or just more ready than before? So what is the first step HR professionals should take to better prepare for their companies and their employees in case of a second wave? And I think there is a lot of discussion. They are preparing us for this potential second wave.
There is discussion in the company, in your organizations.
I think in the news, they're still, don't allow us to feel like we've passed through it. I think in general, the press is commenting on a potential second wave.
There are fears for that, and I think the organizations that are proactive are indeed taking steps. I can speak from my organization, the University of Cyprus, which has reacted very quickly and very systematically. And yes, if there is a second wave, there will be a plan B in terms of, for example, classes and all that. But I don't know to what extent, for example, in terms of productivity that I mentioned earlier, is the university, for example, prepared to measure productivity remotely for the administration, for example. So if there is a second wave, the first thing that I think organizations should do is prepare for crisis management, which was my first point and my first question in the presentation. They should, in my opinion, they should have a crisis mindset that yes, there will be one, and let's hope it's not. So if you think there will be one, then you will prepare for one.
Yeah.
And it depends on the industry, the type of organization, how bureaucratic it is. we've seen how our schools have reacted, our public schools have reacted. Let's hope this doesn't happen again now that they have done the training and they have done the pilot testing, let's say, of the few weeks of kids going to school on rotation. And so I think we should be prepared. Yeah. I really do, for the worst.
But if you think about it, if we have crisis after crisis, and after crisis, or wave after wave, isn't that a new way to be able to respond to crisis and to be able to manage in a way that it's not a crisis anymore, but it's
the norm.
The norm.
You're right. You're right. If it's crisis after crisis, that becomes the norm. Permanent whitewater. One of my professors at the university, the late Peter Vale, which was, I don't know when he wrote this book, 40 years ago, I think, 30, 40 years ago, he talked about living in a permanent whitewater era, always turbulent times. And I think his work is more relevant than ever now. So
yeah, you're right.
We need to get used to the happy change.
Yes, yes. So we have another couple of questions. It would be interesting to see the point of the view of the organization, representative from management, whether they agree with the productivity was higher and or employment levels where engagement levels were good. So we say that we are, but we don't know from the point of the leadership. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, 14% of the respondents were top executives. We didn't split it into the two, but we could try and see if there's any significant difference between the two groups of respondents. The HR professionals were many more, so it would be interesting. I think that we should engage in a number of surveys and across the board, but also within our organizations, because even the 10%, let's say, that felt that they were not more productive, we should find out why. So the numbers are interesting, but they're only scratching the surface. We should really go into detail to see the reasons behind the pluses and the minuses. So, yeah. But yeah, I agree with Ms. Sinisteri. It would be interesting.
And actually, it's more difficult now to measure productivity because the last 3 months, I don't know about the rest of the HR professionals, I found myself doing totally different things than what I used to be doing in the past year. So, right. I was productive, but I was doing totally different things than before. And the focus was more on achieving effectiveness and results rather than just sticking to the policies and activities and procedures. So we have a few more questions. Any thoughts carrying out such a survey? As for the to understand the survey was mainly self-assessment. Okay.
Yeah. The association could actually do that. Since you have over 400 members, you could do a pairwise survey where you ask the managers, you can ask the HR professionals, and you can ask employees, and also top executives, and you can match them all and see within and across organizations. It would be very interesting to do that.
Yes, and these are things that we are very happy to for our members to be coming with ideas and to support in any initiatives that relate to this kind of insights and surveys. So looking into ways of how to get feedback from different forums, and we've been seeing a lot has been happening in the last few months on getting stakeholders together to discuss the situation and how to deal with that. There was also a really nice reference that you made around employees being more involved in the way of thinking and or in the way of working, and how can we listen to them more, because based on this experience, they are now more comfortable to say what works for them and what not. Any thoughts, any further thoughts on that?
I'm always a proponent of employee involvement. I always think that employees have very useful things to say if we ask them. And so, especially since they're they're the ones who are affected. So it's a philosophy that I have, and I think that if we treat people with respect and we ask their opinions, they will reciprocate. They will give us useful feedback, feedback that we may have never have thought, because we don't do the jobs that they do. Yeah.
Yes. And the role of the HR is to, as you said, it's the relationship manager. So they need to bring together insights from the people to the top leadership, and of course, translate the top management intentions into things that make sense for the rest of the organization. So our role is crucial. And I think all of us are proud that we know what's happening in our organization, but surveys give us even more credibility and actually some new insights into how people would like to work and what are the things that they really appreciate and commit. And I think we were all very, I was happily surprised to see in the results that there was appreciation in terms of the efforts of the organizations to continue. There was appreciation around the possibility to work from home and the possibility to continue to produce. So I think we were all pleasantly surprised by these results.
I agree. There is another question here by Mrs. Tsumba.
Okay.
In the hospitality industries, the situation is more difficult. How could the HR managers handle this situation and help those employees that will be unemployed for more than a year?
Any thoughts on this?
The hospitality industry is always very challenging because it's also a seasonal industry. I know that in many cases they use annual, they hire employees for an option would be to hire employees for the year and then use their hours only during the peak periods. And if we say that the peak period is, let's say, April through October, then employees can do annual hours contracts where they can do that. Or I know in Cyprus sometimes what they do is they let them go, they get unemployment benefits, and then they bring them back. Now, 1 year is a long time, or more than a year is a long time, and there should be some ways of possibly bringing in flexibility in the employees' work. If you are able to train employees on different jobs, I know in the States employees get trained on all parts of I used to work in a hotel, and we used to be trained in all parts of the hotel. We used to do housekeeping, we used to do front desk, the same people, breakfast, even we did some basic marketing. So if employees are trained in different jobs, then you can have a more stable workforce, a smaller one, but a more stable one. So I'm sure there are ways that we can think about and investigate on how we can make the hospitality industry more robust in terms of HR. I don't know.
We wish we had some ideas and solutions for the hospitality industry, but of course this is beyond us, and it takes a lot of different stakeholders to sit together to find ways of managing in such a challenged industry, but such a huge industry for us here in Cyprus. My take would be that the HR person should be there to make sure that it keeps everyone together, to be the relationship manager, as you said, and to make sure that there are some good ideas coming on the table. Some legal and regulatory compliance issues are being adhered to. And on the other hand, to maintain the morale of the people, and of course, maintain the organization sustainability to the best way possible. So I think they have one of the hardest jobs to do during this time. There is another question.
Mr. Neogleus, another level of answers may need to come from macroeconomic demand management, economic ministries, and labor ministries. Absolutely.
Yes, yes,
it's a multi-level approach. It has to be.
Mm-hmm. Different stakeholders coming together. Yeah. Okay. We don't have any more questions, so let's give another minute for your questions. And I just wanted to capitalize this couple of minutes to ask your opinion about, you already said about management by objectives. How do you see managing performance being shaped in the future?
Okay. I think managing performance is a difficult issue because it's very time consuming on all respects from all parties, employees, managers, anybody who assesses performance, right? So it's a very serious issue, and it shouldn't be based on past, it shouldn't be static, let's say. So managing performance should be continuous so that people have the chance to improve. If you wait until the end of the year to manage somebody's performance or to assess somebody's performance, it's already too late. So I believe in continuous performance management through informal feedback sessions. And I do believe in management by objectives, because you can set objectives together with your colleagues. And then once they are agreed, both sides are committed to those. And while you discuss these objectives throughout the year or throughout the period that you need to assess that performance, you make sure that whatever barriers are in the way can be overcome if possible. So I do believe in this. And many organizations around the world now are shifting from this 1 year performance management system to more continuous, informal, small groups with managing by objectives. And certainly, I mean, going back to the public sector in Cyprus, it should not be connected to promotions in any way, shape, or form, because that creates the huge problem of, as you know, everybody being excellent. But that's another chapter.
Yes, that's another chapter. Webinar. And we don't have any other questions. So this has been a really interesting hour with you. Thank you very much for presenting the results, for putting your own insights and experience and ideas into how this translates into a new role for the HR. Thank you all for your participation, and thank you all for your questions. It's your questions that make this conversation even more lively and engaging. And I'm sure there's going to be more opportunities, and we do create opportunities to have this discussion and exchange views between us, because when faced with a black swan or a problem that none of us have seen before, it's by bringing different minds together that we can have solutions that are more creative and more effective. So a big thank you again for your time, your contribution, and effort in this, and the ongoing collaboration we have with you and the University of Cyprus.
Thank you too, and I thank the audience as well, and I look forward to further conversations like this.
Okay, and of course, will be the results will be published in our magazine, so our members can kind of have a closer look.
And the YouTube video is also available through the MScHRM YouTube channel, so they can always go back and review.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day, everybody, and thank you again, Professor Costea.
Thank you also.